It's like something in that room grew, and maybe grew more aware of my presence being there. And it was like watching time fold in on itself. I felt like I was meeting an old friend. And that in itself is strange. It's felt like we've had meetings in the past, maybe in different lives, I don't know. I walked down different staircases, and it's almost like at some points I could walk through walls. I was just floating through things, but I wasn't aware that I was. But I saw for the second time that I went to a place without my body. And again, my reality was broken apart again. And still to this day, I don't say that this thing was evil, because I think it was so far and above the concept of good and evil. But there were elements where I just paused just to be slow enough to make observations, like I could see planets, I could see cities, I could see people that maybe they weren't people, but they were like people. This experience was so compacted and so profound, it's taken decades to fully segment it and gain enough of a vocabulary to begin to even try to describe it. Well, hello, my name is Kieran Stanislaw Mace, as my friends call me Stan. Yeah, I have a wife, 2 kids. I live just on the outskirts of Oxford. Yeah, have a pretty happy life now. I'm quite grateful for it. Yeah, I grew up on the outskirts of Oxford in a place called Botley, which is quite an interesting place. We live just halfway up the hill and saw the beautiful view of Oxford. We could actually see the dreaming spires from the distance. Yeah, I used to love the view. I used to look at it every day. It used to just make me smile. But yeah, like the architecture itself is stunning. Like everything just feels like it's a fantasy. And yeah, it's where some of the greatest books ever written were written, of course, by Tolkien, as you know, Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, about Alice in Wonderland, Lewis Carroll. And it's a place of magic. It's a place of quite dark areas. Like there's a lot of darkness to the city too. I would say it's very haunted. People may argue as to whether it is or not, but it has something in the city itself. I've always felt this interesting energy that I've felt quite drawn to, and that's after my NDE experience. But yeah, I had a great time here. It was lovely, and it's a place that my granddad moved to after the Second World War following the situation in Poland, and he met my nan here, Nana Cookin, as I tend to nickname her. She is from Sardinia. And they had a great life here. Just 2 people that met from foreign lands that fell in love and chose to continue their life here in Oxford. And yeah, they were very grateful for the opportunities it gave to them. Yeah, so that's why I'm here, basically. I was kind of born into this little city. And yeah, I mean, I used to kind of go over to my nonna's house. She had a flat in Oxford, eat lots of food. I spent a lot of time in my childhood with my family in Sardinia, so we'd be out there just enjoying ridiculous amounts of food. Also, the family just loved each other out there. Like, we couldn't always understand each other very well because they spoke northern Sardinian dialect. You know, we all looked out for each other, and I had so many happy memories there. I just felt like Sardinia was equally my home as Oxford was. Yeah, I had quite a good life. I didn't really know anything unusual then. I was just quite a calm and content kid. And I have really no bad memories of that age, really. And yeah, and then the accident happened. I remember it being a spring day, so this was April time in 1990. The morning itself, I remember waking up and being really excited to spend time with my nonna, as I called her, Nana Cookin, back in the day, because she obviously cooked a lot. So I used to always go to her house and just cook food with her. I just used to love being part of it, and that was just part of her Sardinian culture, really. She wanted to provide food for everybody. So I remember really looking forward to going to her house that day, and we were in Oxford. I remember waiting at the crossing in Oxford, and seeing the lights going green, because I remember at the time my mum was teaching me a bit about road safety, about which colours to watch for, which are okay to cross. I saw the vehicles to the right of me come to a stop, and for whatever reason, and I don't know why, I heard a voice in my ear as I began to cross. So I was kind of nearly halfway through crossing the road when I heard a woman's voice in my right ear saying, "You're not meant to be here." And that shocked me because it was so loud. It was almost like somebody was there. So I kind of recoiled slightly as if somebody was right next to me. But as I reacted to that, everything went completely black. I remember it was almost like somebody turned the lights out, because I still felt like I was really there standing in the road, but it was nighttime, like I was in this infinite void. It felt like a physical, tangible place, but I was only there momentarily. I wasn't there long enough to fully comprehend what was going on and ask, why am I here? How is this even possible? And it's like life left me out, like I was booted outside of reality. And nobody was there, nobody could hear me. I didn't even have enough time to think what on earth happened. I remember waking up again, almost like I woke up from a dream. And I was laid on the road, looking up at the sky, and people were surrounding me. And I remember people shouting and somebody trying to talk to me, and I couldn't hear what people were saying. And I remember at that point, the most excruciating pain in my legs. And it was pain that I've never forgotten even today. It's a pain that I can still feel now in my body, just deep down inside. And I remember looking down and seeing my legs so broken, they looked like spaghetti basically, in quite an unnatural shape. And there being blood absolutely everywhere. I heard my mum shouting and screaming, and all I knew, this is what I was told, a driver shot straight through the red light for vehicles, straight through, ignored the other vehicles, hit me directly, only narrowly missing my mum by an inch or two. And I was hit so hard, I went over the bonnet, and as he continued to accelerate, not fully reacting fast enough, I went underneath the car. As this man came to a stop, he panicked as he realized what had happened, continued to accelerate again. It could have been his fight or flight instincts kicking in, I get that. But he accelerated again, further dragging me underneath the car, causing more damage. And that's when they then removed me from the vehicle, dragged me to the other side of the road, and called an ambulance, of course. So, the public were absolutely amazing. Like, they just did everything they could do to help. I didn't know this was happening at the time. This is what my mum had told me after. I went through a number of emergency operations to stabilize my body, to stop the bleeding, to try to begin to refuse the bone together. Like, it wasn't a fun time. So I remember coming into and out of consciousness. I could hear doctors discussing something, and I could hear like the clanking of doctors' equipment. I don't know what it was, but it just sounded like metal clinking. And at some point, I woke up once again. And previously, I felt the most excruciating pain. My legs were completely useless. And I was stood again. And it was just like almost entering one room and leaving to go to another. I was just one to another. I was awake again in this other place. What I couldn't understand was my legs weren't hurting anymore. I was standing. I wasn't covered in blood. My legs were working as normal. I was all right. And I wasn't aware at the time of what was going on. I just knew that I was there. And yeah, of course, being confused by the fact that I was awake before, but I'm awake again. I'm waking up from a dream, so which was the dream? So naturally, as any little kid would do, they would look for their mum. I began to walk down this corridor. And as I walked, I began to see elements of this other reality. I could see this hallway, and it looked like a hospital. I could see the walls and various elements around me, like posters and doctor's overalls, but there's something off about this reality. Like, there were colours to it that I hadn't seen at that time. They were completely maybe new to me, but maybe recently not recognizable. I don't know, but it was like an imitation of this reality, like as you could see it now with a certain amount of solidity, but everything was slightly opaque. And the best description I've given so far is imagine light solidified. And that's the best way I can describe this reality. It was a really strange, unusual level of hyper-awareness. And still on that mission to find my mum, I began to walk further down this corridor. There was a doorway to the right of me. I looked through it. I could see there was this kid in there, and I thought naturally, oh, maybe I can speak to him. Maybe he knows where my mum is. So I waved at him, and no reaction. And I said, hey, look at me, help. Nothing. So I walked further along, and there was another doorway there, and I noticed there was a little girl in this room, sat in the bed. I did the same to her, like, hey, help me. Do you know where my mum is? You know, can you see me? And no response, nothing. I just had this feeling in my gut grow bigger and bigger and bigger, like this is feeling really, really wrong. It was almost like a pulling feeling in my stomach, like I was being pulled down. Gravity became stronger, and I felt like my reality in itself was slowly shifting. But imagine those feelings again as a kid. Like you don't even have the words, the vocabulary at that age to describe that. This experience was so compacted and so profound, it's taken decades to fully segment it and gain enough of the vocabulary to begin to even try to describe it. So I walked further, and I walked down different corridors, seeing different wards. I walked down different staircases, and it's almost like at some points I could walk through walls. I was just floating through things, but I wasn't aware that I was. It's just weird. But I felt like I was actually there. But it's almost like, imagine being behind a glass. Like you go to a zoo, for example, you observe an animal behind the glass. I felt like I was observing this reality. It's almost like I stepped into somebody else's observatory in a way. And eventually I found myself in this hallway, and something was at the end. I felt like I was being drawn towards it, like a gravitational push. Rather than downwards now, I was being pulled forward in some way or form. And at the end of this corridor, I remember seeing this kind of interesting gateway. Like there was a lot of electronics there. Like, it was a different kind of door to go through, but I seemed to have easily walked through it. And I went a bit further, and I found myself in this room. And as a kid then, I just described it as some sort of a storage room, really. But I thought, that's interesting. Like, why are there so many washing machines on the wall? And I remember looking to the right of me, and there being a whole wall from top to bottom with washing machines. There were these openings with metal doors. And that was my child's interpretation of what this thing could be. And I remember seeing a metal table in this room, and some shelves and various medicinal objects. Just doctor's bits and pieces. I don't even know what they were though, but it was clearly a used room. But I felt in this room that something was encroaching, something was approaching. Like, it's a feeling that I never will forget. And it's like something so vast entered the room. And my paradoxical explanation is simply the room was visibly empty, as in there was no person or being in that room, just what I could observe. But at the same time, it felt completely and utterly full, like there was an entity or something in there so vast. It was like a giant was sat in the room with me. I couldn't get my head around the idea of this paradox. Like I said, it's one thing cancelling the other. I can see nothing, but it's full. As I began to feel this feeling, it's like something in that room grew, and maybe grew more aware of my presence being there. And it was like watching time fold in on itself. And it kind of cancelled itself out, basically, and I was kind of sucked into this vortex, maybe like a black hole, if you will. And it's like I became split. I just connected with, it felt like everything. My consciousness rapidly sped up, like, this is showing my age anyway, like a VHS tape being sped up. it's almost like it's sped up to the point where it was blurring itself. I couldn't fully understand or comprehend the vast amount of data I was beginning to download at that time. But there were elements where I just paused just to be slow enough to make observations, like I could see planets, I could see cities, I could see people that maybe they weren't people, but they were like people. And I felt like as I was being shown this thing, it's like this incredible beast was over me. Like I felt fear because I couldn't comprehend what was being given to me. And still to this day, I don't say that this thing was evil. So I think it was so far and above the concept of good and evil, as good and evil seem to be human concepts, a human measure, and our human measures are based upon our limited understanding and perception of this reality. So I think this thing, it didn't even understand the concept of good and evil, it just was. And the weirdest thing was, despite me being overwhelmed with this thing that seemed to enhance me massively within that nanosecond, it knew me. I felt like I was meeting an old friend. And that in itself is strange. It's felt like we've had meetings in the past, maybe in different lives, I don't know. But at the same time, I knew in that body, in that moment, or seeming body, I felt like I was meeting it for the first time. Again, another paradoxical view. And this thing, it just seemed to be part of this interconnectedness of everything, like it just seemed to just be everything and all. And I've described it in the past as being like, thinking about Greek mythology, about the gatekeeper and, the boatman, essentially, the river Styx. You pay him a coin to cross the river Styx to enter the underworld. And it's almost like he was the old man at the edge of time. He was there at the threshold. And it's kind of like he decides who crosses and who doesn't. So maybe that's why I knew him from before, because maybe I've been at this crossing before. So yeah, as we began to kind of form this understanding, I felt a little bit less scared of it, but I was more scared of how overwhelmed I was because I was being fed so much data and so much information. It was like an overloaded socket. And imagine like, a low voltage socket being overloaded with a high voltage, and it will just fuse out, it will melt, it will overload. And that's what I felt like I was going through at the time. And what happened was I eventually managed to slow it again for just long enough, and this was the only success I had in kind of getting some sort of control over what was happening. I found myself flying. It was a really weird feeling, like basically Superman style, and I realize how silly that sounds, but I remember looking down and seeing a pathway develop under me, and eventually I saw the beginnings of these steps made out of concrete. As I watched the steps slowly rise up, I eventually saw the beginnings of what would be this train yard. And the train yard I flew over, I thought that's interesting because there's a lake just a bit further beyond, and I watched the steps go down to like another bridge that went over this lake. And as this lake kind of developed under me, I began to kind of look around and think, okay, well, I don't know where I am, what is this? And just in the distance, I could see the dreaming spires of Oxford. I began to recognise, oh, this is home. And at that moment, I kind of came to land, and I don't know whether I chose to land or it allowed me to, but I landed on the bridge. As I landed and just touched the surface of the cement of this bridge, there were these teenagers there. And it's so weird, like they were wearing these tracksuits, and it's like they were in the middle of this conversation, just sat on the bridge. And the one that saw me kind of turned around, and it's like we met eyes for a moment, and he jumped back. He visibly was shocked by something. And in that moment, I felt like he's beginning to see me again. Maybe I'm alive, maybe it's a dream, I don't know. And I was aware of that moment as well, that I was hyper aware. It's like the molecules of the water that was around me I could see, and the cracks and the chain link fence, and there's so much about this bridge that I knew, like the graffiti that was on it. But to me, in my mind, I'd never had been there before. It was entirely new to me. But then I lost control and I was transported back towards this being, and it showed me more and more and more. And I've been trying to unpack what it had downloaded into me all these years later. But yeah, there was one takeaway from this that I found quite humbling but scary at the same time. It gave me something positive to take away from it. The words it told me, there is no me and I, there is only we and us. And it's like it was reminding me, because I felt like the knowledge it was imparting on me was already known. It was just giving me a nudge to remind me. And from this knowing, it's like I knew that everything is connected in the universe, like us people, humans. And it showed me more and more and more, and I just began to burn out at that point. I couldn't take it anymore. It was too much to know. And what's really frustrating from this experience is I don't know everything. I can't remember everything it told me, but I've been taking away bits and pieces over the years. But anyway, I was thrust back into my body again because I called out for my mum one last time. And my mum was my compass back to the world of the living, basically. Like, I eventually was able to identify her energy, was able to teleport myself back to where she was. And just like that, a moment, I woke up. I was in my bed in the pediatric ward. I noticed my legs were in casts. One leg was suspended up in the air. I could see a metal rod going through my leg. My arms were in bandages. I had various different things going in and out of me. I physically couldn't have moved or walked in the hospital or wherever it was that I went to. I looked to the left of me, there she was, and she was there. Yeah, sorry. I feel like I might have to say this bit. It's like when I returned back to the living, she was the first angel I saw, basically. And she was the reason why I came back. Sorry, give me a second, sorry. She did a good job at trying to get me to stay calm over the following weeks, where they did the various tests, other operations they had to do. I was just bedbound the whole time. There's nothing much I could do. And I almost assigned the experience as a dream, basically. It was just easier to live with the idea of it being a dream. And as the weeks went by, I got better and better. I began to think less about this thing. When this nurse came to me one day and said, hey, like, you've had a horrible time. You're doing brilliant now. I want to give you a little reward. I think you've earned this. And I said, what do you mean? She pulled out this wheelchair and said, off you pop, basically. It's time for you to have a look around, stretch your legs, even though I couldn't move my legs, but yeah, stretch my legs metaphorically. And yeah, I couldn't say no to that opportunity. So by then I was disconnected from the pulleys. My legs were still in casts, but I could be moved from the bed. And yeah, I was just really thrilled just to be somewhere completely different for a moment in time. And she took me on a little ride. So as I entered the first corridor, the first hallway, rather than feeling really happy and elated as I was a moment ago, I felt immediately that pull of gravity, that pull down, that feeling of that overwhelmingness, that overwhelming feeling of this thing, because the reality that I saw facing me was an exact alignment of what I saw in that out-of-body experience. And just thinking back to it, as I arrived in the ward after my major operations, I wouldn't have consciously been able to record and see myself going through those corridors. So to me, in my body at that moment, I was there for the first time. So I was beginning to feel a bit uneasy, but the nurse carried on. And as I went by, I saw the little boy in the room to the right of me, the little girl to the left of me in the other room. And it just kept aligning and aligning and aligning. I saw the posters that I saw on the wall, the stickers, the little pen marks, the strange identifiers that I was aware of as I was outside of my body, essentially. And I began to tell the nurse where to go: turn left, turn right, go through this corridor, go this way. And eventually we actually found our way to the elevator. So I went down a level, and then explored further, told her where to go, went down another level. Eventually we reached this area that was kind of like a secure area where a certain distance down this hallway was a security gate and there's like a guard's office, and they had to obviously let you go through. But you can actually see through to the beginnings of where this area is. Essentially it's the lower levels of the hospital, and the nurse wouldn't let me go further because she just clocked where we were. As I looked through the window, I felt that feeling get so strong, and it felt exactly like this entity. I could see that room through this window, this little opening. Just in the distance, I could see the room with the so-called washing machines, the round doors with the metal round holes. I could see the various, like, the metal bed that was in there and this doctor's stuff. I don't know what it was. I could see just enough distance away to recognize, oh gosh, that's the room. Is it there? And in my mind, I was beginning to realize, this is real. This isn't a dream. This isn't a dream. This isn't a dream. I began to panic. I was shaking, and I later found out years later, after looking into the history of the hospital and where I was, the room where I met the entity was a morgue. And it wasn't the main morgue section. It was like a preparation room before the main section where it was more secure. So obviously there's a reason why I couldn't go further. And I realized that is a weird thing to say, thinking, well, how was a kid allowed to go near a morgue, essentially? The nurse was just doing her best to just keep me happy. She wasn't really thinking that far ahead. I only just realized, I think she only realized as we got closer what was going on. So I think maybe she was thinking, I'm freaking out because I'm seeing something like to do with dead bodies, basically. When in reality, I realized that I was conscious and I saw this place and I shouldn't have been able to. So that was my first landing with reality, and that was an experience I will never forget. But I remember it was quite close to the end of my time in hospital, where I was laid in bed one night and couldn't sleep for whatever reason. I could see the kids opposite on the other side of the room to me were asleep, and I could see the nurses in their area doing their thing. And I noticed that was something at the end of my bed. And to me, it felt like a gravitational shift again. Something was there pulling, but now at the end of my bed, not me. And I immediately looked down, and it's kind of like I couldn't move. I realized I couldn't move my head. I was only focused on the end of the bed. And I could see the end of the bed, these protector bars. And there was something behind the protector bars. I could see just the top of something dark. And I assumed it was one of the kids maybe playing with me, just maybe a prank of some sort. I realized that as it rose up, I saw the texture of like burnt wood, almost burnt meat, basically, like this thing. It had no hair, but it was slowly rising above the protector bar. I was completely frozen. I couldn't move, but I needed to scream. And think of the phrase, I must scream, but I have no mouth. It's like that, basically. I could not outlet this energy of pure, utter, just, fear. For lack of a better word, just pure fear. As it rose up, I began to see it had the shape of a face, and I saw these two long, spindly fingers wrap over the protector bar, very slowly kind of curving over, and it stopped. It stopped just where the chin was, or what I would describe as a chin was, but the thing that stood out the most through the blackness of this entity was two eyes, two white eyes glowing through the darkness. And they weren't regular eyes of just interest. They're eyes of the eyes of someone who looks shocked, almost traumatized, purely like, it's an image that I'll never forget. It's something I can never fully describe, but imagine something like that, having complete power over you. Nothing you can do. The nurses, you can't even call out to them because you have no voice. You can't say anything or do anything. And all this thing did was just sit there and watch. It happened, I don't know whether it happened for 10 minutes, 1 minute, half an hour, but it felt like forever. I just kept wishing this thing to go, leave me alone, go away. It just sat there watching me. It was absolutely fascinated with my situation. And I've described this thing before as, could it be potentially the almost consciousness forming from the trauma of souls passing in the hospital? Maybe. Is it something that saw me on the other side, that followed me back because I had come back very much changed after this experience, maybe? Or could it simply be a psychological manifestation of what I had been through? Helplessness, the shock and the horror, could it be my little mind trying to comprehend what happened? This thing later would follow us back home and terrorize us for years. It was awful. As the weeks went by, and thankfully I left this place, I eventually was discharged from the hospital with a recovery plan. And slowly over time, bit by bit, I was able to walk again. My mum, bless her, like she was told, we're going to level with you now. Like it's likely like this little kid is going to have brain damage and it's likely that he may not be able to walk again. That in itself, like imagine a mother being told that. But somehow through this experience was able to make an almost full recovery. My brain was pretty much normal by the way they read it. My legs were able to work again. But I noticed coming back that my brain worked very, very differently. Like I had new thoughts that I didn't have before. I felt feelings that were far more in depth than they were before the accident. And it seemed to be overnight I had this artistic ability. I had this obsession with art. I couldn't stop drawing because I felt like as I drew towards the end of my time in the hospital and after, it was like I was bloodletting the pain. I was letting out all of the hurt. And weirdly, I felt like that was the thing that was helping my body to recover. Obviously, aside from the fact that I had very good doctors and I'm very lucky in that regards, but I felt like something happened there that helped me to give me a booster, I suppose, to return back to normality. So yeah, that's another way where it changed me because I saw the world in a very, very different way. I functioned differently. I spoke very differently. There was something very off about me that made other kids feel a bit nervous, I admit. So I was a bit of a loner sometime as I tried to comprehend, what happened to me, the PTSD that came with it, and just try to live a normal life. Like I say, what happened to me after I tried to return and just be a normal kid and just do the things that normal kids do, which I was failing at tremendously. I was on the way to Oxford with my friend one day. So this is years later when we were older, and this is back in the 90s where kids, even though they were quite young, were just left to their own devices. Oxford's quite known to be quite bad in terms of like traffic. So he had an idea with his mum, said, actually, can you just drop us off on this village, South Hinksey village, just on the outskirts, because I've discovered this way in, we can avoid all the traffic and make an easier way in. And it was new to me at the time though, so I just followed him. I thought, yeah, well, why not? So we started walking on this pathway, and locals will call this pathway the Devil's Backbone. So as I followed my friend onto this walkway, we kind of walked through the countryside. It was all new to me. I had that pulling feeling again. Something was approaching that I recognized, that something odd. As I looked, I saw the startings of these concrete steps leading up to this bridge. I was a bit uneasy as I took the first steps, and I couldn't put my finger on why something felt so odd here. As I reached the top, I saw this train yard. That's when I began to recognize, I saw this in the dream. This is the place I've been to before, but this is new. But it's old, but it's new, but it's old, but it's new. It's like my mind wasn't quite able to comprehend the fact that I was encountering something new, but I'd previously had been there, but how could I have been there when I was there for the first time? As I walked over this bridge, more and more of it aligned with reality. As the bridge went down a few more steps, I saw another bridge that went over the lake. And that's where it hit me the second time, just like it did in the hospital with the morgue. There it was. The place I flew, I landed over. I was able to identify the exact point where I was able to touch the ground, and I saw those kids and I made them jump. And I saw the dreaming spires in the distance. Everything aligned exactly, every last little detail, like even like the breakings of the chain link fence. There are certain things that were missing, and it's just like, even then it was an old haggard bridge. It wasn't the most beautiful thing, but I recognised it. I just freaked out even then. My friend, bless him, didn't know what was going on. I just started shaking, and I remember I couldn't speak. I just froze. And again, that could be the effects of PTSD. I get that as well. Sometimes it takes a few years for you to fully react to it through your body. But I saw for the second time that I went to a place without my body. And again, my reality was broken apart again. So all those few years I spent trying to be a normal kid, again, were broken once again. I just knew that at that point that I couldn't be normal. I couldn't really escape that thing. And psychologists call this thing ontological shock. And it's this definition where essentially your reality is unmade. So everything that you knew before that formed your identity, the identity of the world that you are within it, is unmade. It's null and void, invalid, gone, kaput. And when you're left without that, you question who you are, what this world is. It's a frightening feeling of no longer having the safety net of a defined world, the parameters that are defined for you. And after that experience, I continued trying to be normal at school. I continued going to church, Sunday school, everything they were saying at church, despite all the lovely people there singing all the beautiful hymns and the readings from the Bible, deep down in my heart, I felt like it's gone. I couldn't believe in it anymore. And that was a struggle that I went through for a few years, where I've called this thing the burden of knowing. And the best way I can describe it is, imagine wearing a sock for a number of years and having that temporarily taken off. Sometimes putting that same sock back on, it doesn't quite fit right. You could try and make it look like the sock, the fittings of the sock that it was before it all happened, but it always feels just off. It never quite fits again, and it never will do. And that's what an experiencer goes through. So when I went through that, I just didn't feel right. I didn't feel like I was in the world of the living still, even years later. I didn't feel like I was alive. Sometimes I did even question, did I really die out there, and all this is just a simulation I'm going through as I'm crossing over? I have contested that as well, even from a young age. But I just couldn't be normal. And I tried to even forget about it and just leave everything. And I began to do that by leaving the religion I was part of back then, going, okay, well, I'm going to deny that, because if I was part of that religion and I'm having that conversation with myself, I have to also contend with the knowing that I have. So sometimes as an experiencer, sometimes you choose to just completely forget and ignore, because there are really the three states. I've discussed this many times through my podcast and in my book and everything, that we have believer and non-believer / skeptic. A believer and a non-believer are essentially the same. They're both acting upon belief. A belief being, okay, I don't have the knowledge or all the knowledge. I'll make my own observations and I'll decide what I believe and don't believe in. There's nothing wrong with that. And as a skeptic, you ask questions, you try and derive some sort of truth from those situations, but you still believe in your non-belief to an extent as well, and that's okay. That's no problem, I get that. Us experiencers are given direct empirical. So we have a truth to live with, and it doesn't matter whether we believe or don't believe, we just have it. And yes, we can choose to ignore it, but we can't let go of that. So I did spend a number of years kind of almost operating as an atheist, really, okay, if I just ignored this thing, maybe it would let me go. But it didn't, because it followed me home. I know, because it may be an age thing, because a lot of NDE stories tend to happen to people that are older and in adult age. So they've had the life living as whichever their chosen belief or non-belief is, so that may influence the way they interpret the higher vibration. So ultimately it falls under this whole high vibration thing. So the highest level of consciousness, that it's almost like the intermediary between us at the lower vibration and whatever it is beyond. But I was so young that even though I was being indoctrinated into the church at the time, I wasn't so saturated. I believe that I saw it in such a pure way. Yes, it was overwhelming for my younger developed mind at the time, but I saw it at its purest, unfiltered view. And it was scary, yes, but that's my interpretation of it. Because it was, imagine if now you immediately knew what the number of infinity looked like. If you've been observing the number 0 for a number of years, went from 0 to infinity, but trying to comprehend that as a number, an actual number with your human brain, that's going to hurt. Imagine a little kid doing that, going from 0 to infinity in a heartbeat, or technically non-heartbeat in that case. It's just what it is. So my fear response was me not being able to comprehend. And fear does tend to fall in alignment with lack of knowledge, lack of knowing. And humans fear a lot that they don't understand. That's why they build parameters. That's why they build religions and names and descriptions and measures, and trying to understand what they can within the parameters of their understood and perceivable reality, I suppose. That's what assessment I've made over this experience. And yes, it was scary. Why did I not have a big, lovely, loving experience, lovey-dovey experience like other NDE people have had? It's because I'm without the filter. There's nothing there. And yeah, over time, as I went back to church, I began to be, more Jesus, saints, Bible, and so on to overlay on top of that. But underneath was this ongoing, but I saw this. You said this, but I saw that. You said this, but I saw that. So like I say, that aligns with the burden of knowing, basically. There's like an underlying, okay, well, there's your parameters. Here's my empirical. Well, parameters versus empirical. Empirical tends to often trump the parameters that you've put as your measure. So yeah, I mean, that's my human understanding at this point in my life. Next week, I could have a different interpretation of this thing. That's the thing, like I'm fully at peace with knowing that my ideas could change, that I could meet someone today or tomorrow that could give me a better insight maybe. So yeah, I still say to anybody listening to the story, like, think for yourselves, decide. I'm not here to tell you what to think. I may have given you my interpretations, but my view isn't absolute just yet, nor is yours. So don't be afraid to just try to describe something. It doesn't mean you're putting a parameter out there. You're not limiting yourself, but at least try to be open to these things, I suppose.